Hello, we're off. We're off. Brilliant. Now just let's make sure we have the sound. Using your microphone. That's fine. Okay. Yeah. Jesus. Okay. Right. Your hide recording in progress. This tab must stay open, or your recording will be cancelled. Okay. Yeah. So we should be able to search, and we should be able to have a Word document open that we can reduce in a blank document. I'll be able to write things, okay, and have our notes and that. We're going. Okay, you're very welcome. There's a lot of new people have been joining this week, and there's people coming in from Erasmus who are on their way back, study abroad. You're all more than welcome. I've had a lot of emails to add people to Solace. I've been adding you. There's a good few of you out there. Perhaps one of the principal reasons we're doing this at the moment who haven't been able to find accommodation, are not able to be there tomorrow morning. So we're trying to accommodate you as much as possible with through these recorded lectures. Today we're going to talk principally about Italian neorealism. Help if I spelled it. I asked you to watch again. It's seminal movie of Italian neorealism, The Bicycle Thieves, which, excuse me, I hope you enjoyed. Again, it's one of those films that film studies were here in an introduction course. You're not allowed to criticise. You are, of course. You can do whatever you want, but it's seen as one of this a of art house cinema, film studies. Andre Bazin, who we'll come back to when we talk about the French New Wave, calls it the only true film. Film. Okay. So, but why I asked you to watch it is it's seen as this seminal, quintessential example of Italian neorealism, which is one of the great cinematic movements, theoretical movements, genre. The reason that we're studying film studies, the reason why we're here in university studying is because of this. To give a bit of background, I mean, we can call about Italy of the three C's. And that's China, Calcio, and Cinema. So Italy will always be, when we talk about film studies, Italy is a country we come across again and again. As much when we talk about soccer, Brazil, this comes up again and again. But it's cinema. It's Italy. Some descriptions from a cultural studies point of view of Italy of the three C's: cucina, which is cooking. We know about Italian reputation from pizza to pasta. Calcio, which is football, again Italian obsession, and cinema. And cinema in Italy is, I can't emphasize its importance in La Stampa, which is the posh newspaper in Italy, like the Irish Times here, or the I'm trying to get Le Monde in France. Is it the Zait in Germany? That El País ABC for the Spanish people. That you've a page dedicated every day to cinema. When films, the figures we're going to mention today, and we're only introductory. But just names we'll come across. De Sica, who directed The Bicycle Thieves, Fellini, Rossellini. These are the high priests, not just of Italian cinema, but of Italian culture. So very much we're departing from that point in Italy where these are the writers. I mean, in Ireland we've some great film directors. People say, who, Neil Jordan, but it's the person on the street. Okay, when an Oscar's won and the Banshees of Inisherin, but more here. Who in Ireland do we? I mean, it's a good question. Who are our, who do we look up to culturally? Poets to a degree, James Joyce and writers and that, but cinema directors, no. Um, in United States, it could be Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, financiers, Henry Ford in the past, in Australia, sports stars, Shane Warne, etc. In Italy, it's cinema directors. So I can't emphasize enough the power and reach of Italian neorealism. What does neorealism mean? Neo, coming from the Greek, means more than realism. So for the first time in Italian neorealism, we see films, um, black and white, of course. We love black and white Italian, uh, about real things. Up until then, cinema had been seen as escapist. So it's anti-Hollywood. It's about real things, characterized principally by stories set amongst the poor and the working class. It's a national film movement, films on location, frequently with non-professional actors. And they're films about real, we address the difficult economic, moral conditions of post-World War Italy. We see conditions of everyday life, poverty, oppression, injustice, desperation. We saw all them in the bicycle thieves. So we deal with, up until then, with Hollywood, we saw it, Gone with the Wind, was great, but we'd never seen these real things on the screen. A couple of films that are huge of Rome Open City. First, I guess we should really put up is Obsession, 1943, which is seen as, I think, the first, and that's of Visconti. Don't worry, we're seeing all the names. We just Ossezione, which is later made as the postman always rings twice again. That's the first real neo-realist films. Then we moved 1945 to the huge one of Rome, Open City. 45, that's Federico Fellini. And out of that comes the word Fellini-esque. Things are Fellini-esque. That it's. Sorry, Jesus Christ, what am I doing? Rome Open City. I'm getting Roberto Rossellini. And uh, Rome Open City is actually shot with when the Germans are still in Rome. So we see this, the idea of it being authentic. Authenticity is very important in neorealism. It's those, maybe you might call them bored movies, real movies. The Hurt Locker, know about Iraq. Movies that really hit home, that have a didactic message. Often still in Italy, you'll find that when an Italian neorealist movie comes on, before it, a director will come on, or somebody like me, a kind of a cinema guy, and will tell you what you should think or what you should watch for. So it is that moving cinema from just a film, let's go to the movies, to an academic text, albeit an academic visual text. So Rome Open City deals with collaboration, um, and then collaboration with the Nazi regime, with the German occupiers. And the idea is supposed to be that this is real, and that there's a famous all reality ends up on the cutting room floor. So we don't like editing, we don't like cutting films. That's Hollywood. Again, hopefully in your, as we go on in this course, I want you to criticize, and you hopefully you'd say to me, but neorealism, it's just the use of children. You see the use of the child in the bicycle thieves that you see. So there is a manipulation, and that is a huge question. Is there any manipulation in Italian in neorealism? course, huge manipulation. But why we're concentrating so much on this is we'll see then, obviously, the bicycle thieves, which you've hopefully seen by Sika, Umberto D, which deals with, um, um, again, the Sika deals with a suicide. It deals with an old man, loneliness, depression. We see those films every day. In the end, he doesn't. He's got a little dog with him. He decides not to. But up until then, we didn't see those things on the screen. We might have read about them. But for the first time on a cinema screen, we see those real problems dealt with. Miracle in Milan, Miracolo Milano. We see young urchins on the street, and for the first time, we see a young urchin urinating, having a wee against the wall. Real things that now you see in we're anaesthetised, but for the first time, we see poverty. Again, a great Paisa, great Rossellini film set in Naples. There's a coloured, black American serviceman. It's the first time we see it on the screen. Up until then, all soldiers were white in all the great movies about World War II, which are said we don't see black servicemen. And there were a lot of black servicemen in the US Army. So the idea of neorealism is these real, real things, real themes. When did it, and what's so important to us is the legacy of Italian neorealism, which is everywhere. Martin Scorsese, probably the reason some of you were doing this course or decided to do digital culture and communication, growing up in those films, Taxi Driver, Casino, The Irishman, The Departed, Goodfellas, all. Martin Scorsese, it's almost just so influenced, because when you go to film school, this is what you study, Italian neorealism. And that's the huge influence behind Scorsese. Francis Ford Coppola, very, very same. When you look at the Godfather films, hugely influenced by neorealism. Apocalypse Now. So all of that, you could really almost say that cinema studies begins with Italian neorealism. And that's why we're kind of, I suppose, dedicating so much time to it. Came about at a very important period, because Italian neorealism comes about as World War II ends. Mussolini's fascist government dictatorship has fallen. And it's seen as a sign of cultural and social change in Italy. No one knew at that time, and we're talking about the dates, I suppose we could talk about 1945, really, to 53. No one knows the direction of Italy. Well, Italy still has the largest communist party in Europe. Italy could be part of, at the moment, we're all living through the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine, which stems from World War II. It stems from NATO and Warsaw Pact and Russian expansion. Italy could have been part of that Warsaw Pact. That was the direction that it was. Finally, in '53, Togliatti, the Communist Party leader, is shot and wounded. Italy goes the direction of the Christian Democrats, but the Italy that we know today of Dolce and Gabbana and Armani and we, European founder member Treaty of Rome, that was really up for discussion, firmly up for discussion and up for debate in that period of late 40s. And where was the debate taking place? On the cinema screen. Reasons for this, then, there's some dark reasons behind it. Huge rate of illiteracy in Italy. People didn't read newspapers, books. So the cinema screen becomes, in many ways, the message board for these messages or ideas of change in Italian society. So the films present these contemporary stories, ideas, shot in location. Again, some of this is because of, which is still Cinecittà, Cinema City, huge on the outskirts of Rome, well worth seeing if you ever, is huge film studios were damaged during World War II. So in some ways, this is why we have these films being shot in location in real time. French New Wave, all these we talk about in the weeks to come, they all come out of film noir in the United States. They're born out of Italian neorealism. So, and there is a theoretical magazine, Cinema is a name, and film critics. They would talk about these films. Um, as we said, the directors Luciano Visconti, Puccini, Sabatini, De Santis with Bitter Rice. We see all these type of films. Pietro Ingrao, coming from a theory of realist novels at the time, Albert Camus, the French, Samuel Beckett, these type of Christ Stopped at Everly, put that down, shows for the first time of Eboli. Christ Stopped at Everly, Cristo sia fermato Eboli, Christ. Again, this is literature and this is taken to the screen. So ideas of existentialism, and these are taken to the cinema screen. So, as we said, the first there is 1946 with shot in 45, released in 46. We put 46, we change it for Roberto Rossellini. And I'm spelling him wrong again. I always do this. He's two L's. Rossellini. Rossellini. Yep, Roberto Rossellini. And Rome Open City won the grand prize at the Cannes Film Festival. And neorealism almost overnight becomes famous globally. Then, and very much the idea of the individual. That's a huge concern in Italian neorealism, the fate of the individual. And you can see that in and the individual in some ways then gets almost is a microcosm for the fate of society, and that very much is the theme of the bicycle thieves that we'll talk about in a while. Later on in the 50s, then we have huge Giulio Andreotti, who'll be one of the huge politicians, a De Valera-like figure in post-war Italy, and he makes a comment about neorealism when he comes to power, that neorealism is, I quote, dirty laundry that shouldn't be washed and hung to dry in the open. Okay, so Italy goes back. Italy then enjoys in the late 50s, 60s an economic miracle, and themes of neorealism begin to lose their relevance. So the Italy we see today in American movies become more popular. We move from neorealism to Fellini, La Strada, transitional movies, and then to Antonioni's Red Desert, Blow Up, these type of films. But we see the legacy of neorealism through all these. We do see in the early 50s, and I think it's a director who I think we need to just mention, Bruno Caruso, who makes the Palermo films. Again, very, very interesting. Um, his work focuses, the neorealist torch was on the warehouses, shipyards, psychiatric wards of Palermo, Sicily. So, what are the characteristics of neorealist films? Non-professional actors, which again is something new we did, and this is quite striking in Italy because Italy originally was in 1920s, 30s. Italy was founded the star system. The word diva, we get that DIVA, comes from Italy. So we have this huge change about where we have amateur actors, shot in location, rundown cities, rural areas. We see it in the bicycle thieves, the suburbs of those rundown on the outskirts of Rome. Background of local people. Neorealist films explore the conditions of the poor and the lower working class. Survival, the primary objective. Performances are people mundane, quotidian activities. Children, we do see, and that's something I do want you to think about as we go on, the use of children, which I think is quite manipulative. And we see that through Umberto D, Rome Open City in particular. And I mean, the bicycle thieves, it's like when that scene at the end, when, especially if any of you have children, I find it quite very difficult to watch after I had had a child, and you just don't want to let down your children, and you're watching, you let the and the close-ups. Again, this very much would be huge themes. The French New Wave, the first close-ups of the child's face when he sees his dad having stolen the bicycle. So it's the struggle of ordinary life, the struggle of which is very much this post-war period of existentialism, communism, Sartre's writing about in France. We see it on the screen in obviously Rome Open City. It's the day-to-day under the difficulties of German occupation. And in the bicycle thieves, we see that the hardships of working class life after the war. At the height of neorealism, that it's, one could argue it is very, very stylized. And there's even psychoanalytic type of analysis of which talks about neorealist film and engendering the structure of anxiety in post-war Europe onto the cinema screen. Whether we can call it, I think definitely it's a school, or and later on in this course you'll hear you'll hear the Dogma 95 movement in Denmark. We'll talk about the French New Wave next couple of weeks. I did the Polish film school. Mariano would know all of Brazilian cinema, Novo, India's parallel cinema movement. But I do stress that that is just so strong. This idea of Italian neorealism as the seminal movement, almost as a bud from which so many cinematic movements came from. Even in Italy itself, we just call it the golden age of Italian cinema. On all these directors that you'll hear about in this course as we go on, Fellini, we'll then talk about Pier Paolo Pasolini, Bertolucci, Antonioni, who worked in the. There's definitely that legacy and continue on. The idea of masters and disciples, right on to Tornatore and Noce in Paradiso, which we'll talk about in the weeks to come, heavily influenced by and dominated, in fact, by the idea of Italian neorealism. Kind of the main works, as we said, there's different ones you come across. Shoeshine, about Shoeshine Boys, that's the CU4121, Paisa, Rossellini 46. Germany Year Zero is actually shot in Germany in 48 by Rossellini. And The Bicycle Thieves, the one 1948, which I asked her to watch. I mean, that film is on every, it's almost outdone itself, whether it's overrated. I lived in, spent some years at the University of Canterbury in New Zealand, in Christchurch. Son was born there. Great love for Christchurch, beautiful place in New Zealand. Middle of the most popular bar, and the cool bar, when we were young, was the Bicycle Thief. The Bicycle Thief in the centre of the city. Where it's just, I remember I asked the guy, I said, listen, I've done some work in this film, and he was that. He was a guy into cinema. A lot of people in New Zealand, we would do some work in New Zealand cinema as the weeks go on, but obsessed with this film that he just built a whole theme bar, pictures of the bicycle thieves around, and all these kind of what do we call them now here? Hipsters, drinking craft beer in the Bicycle Thief in the centre of Christchurch. Latimer Square was knocked down, the bar, sadly, in the earthquake of 2010, just after my son was born. But but is now on the outskirts. The earth trembles, La Terra Trema, Visconti 48. You'll see that in Cinema Paradiso in 1989 film. People watching La Terra Trema, people speaking in the vernacular. That's a huge thing as well. Accents are gone. There's not people. When you watch American movies, everyone has this nice accent in the 40s. Certainly, you don't hear people speaking. Now we do. That's normal now. People that New York slang. That all started with Scorsese. People, taxi driver, are you talking to me? That's influenced from Italian neorealism. In La Terra Trema, the earth trembles, people talking in Siciliano. Sicilian, the dialect of um, um, we get that. If you speak Italian, you'll hear the people in the bicycle thieves are speaking in a in a rough Roman accent. Um, Nowadays, that's when we see cardboard gangsters and we see people talking in Dublin accents and all the type of. But um, that all stemmed from Italian neorealism. Stromboli, again, Rossellini, 1950, as Germany Year Zero. Umberto D, which deals with an old man, depression as such, 1952. And that's generally seen as the kind of one of the last films of neorealism. 1953, the Christian Democrats come to power. And then Rossellini does make a film, which I think we should really, Journey to Italy, 1954 by Rossellini. That's really seen as kind of the last significant film of neorealism. Hugely influence, huge influence on Russian cinema, Tarkovsky, Greek cinema, Middle Eastern cinema. When you go to cinema school, which is what most film directors, this is the first thing you come across, a bit like you today. Okay, so I want to move on now because we'll be coming back again and again to Italian neorealism and talking about it. I want to talk actually in a bit more detail, obviously from an Italian neorealist viewpoint, about the film that I asked you to watch for today, Journey to Italy. I'm starting to spell now. So we're going to talk a bit about the actual bicycle thieves and do a small bit of which we'll be doing in this throughout this course. Asked you to watch it by. The funny thing is that Vittorio De Sica, who directed the Bicycle Thieves, 48, and he also does Miracle in Milan, 1951, Umberto D, 52, made in 51 but released 52. He made Shoeshine early in 46. Another one, The Children Are Watching Us again, very Children Are Watching Us again, 1943, a very early neorealist film. After neorealism, De Sica makes very, very little. He doesn't actually, he ends up kind of appearing on television, making advertisements in the 1960s. Perhaps that's why, and I want you to think about this, why Italian neorealism is so celebrated, so lauded, because it lasted such a short time. A bit like James Dean, passed away very young, or as an actor. A pop band. Best thing in pop band is have a couple of singles, Joy Division, and you become a cult band rather than growing old. You end up like, God, don't quote me, U2 or something. That best thing release, best thing for a footballer, best thing for, if anyone's in this, Jude Bellingham is to retire now. Had a great World Cup, or some guy finished, because you end up becoming an old, poor Cristiano Ronaldo. That go out on a high. So maybe that's part of the reason that Italian realism, these great directors, and then we just keep talking about the legacy, and the legacy in Italy. In Italy, actually, is three main ones. Before we get into Bicycle Thieves, we see a love of talk about 1 second. Put up these. We almost see neorealism break off in Italy itself, 1960s especially on, into three separate trends. One is, and every year, enjoy giving this lecture. You're not, at least we're not in person, you'd laugh at me because I have to pronounce phenomenological. Phenomenological post neorealism. That is neorealism dealing with phenomena. So you might say it's not real at all. Fellini is the master of this. We mentioned earlier films like La Strada, Roma, between the two of them, La Dolce Vita, The Sweet Life, gives us paparazzi, all those words. Fellini would walk the streets of Rome and he uses phenomena like people had strange faces. He would take them, put them in a film. Um, um, it's brilliant. He just isn't an Irish guy from Limerick used to drink at the White House in town, and he took Desmond. Just he saw him walking on the street. And he appears in La Dolce Vita, which is absolutely cool, along with Marcello Mastroianni and all these famous Annie Ekberg, because he decided that his face fitted that. So the idea that phenomena reflect things in society, and that's not real at all. But you can see how it fits into an academic. Even these words. When someone says, "Did you like that film?" Yes, it's a good example of phenomenological post neorealism, and we have this word with Fellini-esque. There was a cafe for years, anyway, from Cork called Fellini's. It becomes worthy of study. The way we say Shakespearean, Dickensian, we say Fellini-esque. Romantic post-neorealism, Visconti, came from neorealism as the big director here. Films like Death in Venice. And a huge interest to academics, interior post-neorealism. Antonioni, big guy here who ends up going to Hollywood, and again, what do we do here? We see architects love this. We see colors, we see angles, directions. The Red Desert, those type of films, huge here. Desert of Rosso, reflecting the inner turmoil of the main characters. So this is classic academic film studies type of stuff. Antonioni, who is the big director here, of this, who Blow Up, which he makes again, crossovers with David Hemmings, shot in English about seeing things through a screen. So you can see it's just full on academic kind of stuff. Okay, we'll pause there for a second, and I get my, and we're going to talk about more skill thieves. We're back recording. We are okay. So let's go back to our word that we had there a second ago. We opened, we had a blank document, had we? Okay, so we can talk a bit more about, you can see me again, bicycle thieves. 1948, sometimes called as films like The Bicycle Thief. Um, uh, and that's a huge question. Who actually stole? Did him and his father? But I always, it's in Italy, in Italian, it was released as Ladri the Biciclette, so it's bicycle thieves. But we're not going to fight about that. Story, what is the plot really? It's a poor dad, post World War II Rome, for his stolen bicycle. The bicycle offers him the chance of a job, the salvation of his young family. There was a novel and the adaptation is by Sabatini, Cesare Sabatini. He adapted for the screen. It's from a novel from Bartolini, 1946. And again, these are amateur actors. Lamberto Maggiorani did nothing after Desperate Father. Enzo Staiola, the young boy, very few films afterwards. It got an Academy, so these not films just lost in Italy. It got an Academy Award for the most outstanding foreign language film, and it's often cited as the greatest film of all time. So now you've seen it. But what it is, whether you like it or not, or whether we can pick at it and we can criticize it, and I hope we do, but definitely is one of the most influential films in cinema history, and it's part of this classic cinema, and it did have a very very strong influence on the collective memory of Italy and influence on the country. So as the plot is, that's a real neighborhood. It's the Val Melaina neighborhood. It's equivalent in Limerick. It's a Myross, or it's at Toher in Dublin, and Toher's are in Cork. What's the area in Dublin? Darndale. It's a poor area. Paolo Di Canio, the footballer, some of you might remember, some years came from these large, on the outskirts of Rome, which were built of social housing with all the problems that come with it. French students will HLM, which are on the outskirts of les banlieues, as we call them in French. Those in the outskirts. You have some Spanish students here, South Madrid, Getafe, all those large kind of dormitory areas in the outskirts. So Antonio Ricci, is desperate for work, that post-World War, you see deprivation to support his wife, the cute son Bruno, little baby. So he gets this job to pay his advertising bills. Noticed he needs a bicycle. She sells her bed sheets to a pawn shop to get the bicycle, so he can get his work. And then we see the bicycle being stolen. So it's about the injustice of life. The bicycle is stolen. And then he turns to all the different groups in society to help. So this is it's an allegorical film. And allegorical means it represents bigger things in society. He turns to the police. Police said there's nothing they can do. Turns to the church. Turns to the different. Then we see by at the market. We see that and there's that very very strong scene where they go to eat. You've seen that with his son, and we see the upper classes and how they can eat, how the son can't eat, and very much we see that kind of class structure. It's a film about class wars in many ways. Then so we see he goes to who helps you in society, who's there to help you, and then of course is this film that we'll see that, as I said earlier, the only true communist film is the communist is communism. He goes to a political group and they can't help him either, and Thief's apartment is searched, jeers and threats from the crowd. And then there's the very strong scene when they're way home. We see them walking near the football stadium, and he sees the bicycle. And then we see the soul searching. He tells Bruno to take the tram to another stop nearby and wait. And then he steals the bicycle. Is this justified? That's really kind of up to you to decide who's our sympathy. And then we see Bruno has missed the tram. He's stunned. He sees his father pursued, surrounded, and pulled from the bicycle. We do see, that's something for interpretation and something we talk about. That's very manipulative when we see the bicycle's owner notices Bruno, child crying, he's hanging on to his dad's leg. And moment of compassion, he tells the others to release Antonio. Very, very strong scene at the end is that Antonio and Bruno walk off slowly, and now they merge into the crowd where the individual becomes the mass. And the camera watches from behind. And it's a really, really strong scene as he disappeared into the crowd. And the crowd is modern Italy. It's contemporary Italy, and it's very much a theme in neorealism: the individual and the mass. I would be dealing with them. Don't it's a very strong. So it's probably the most famous work, The Bicycle Thieves. I'm glad you've seen it. Of the best known work of Italian neorealism, along with Rome Open City. Again, even what makes it even stronger, the Secret had made just Shoeshine before. 1946 about shoeshine boys, urchins. Who wants to watch these films? Now we watch them. But who people wanted to watch? Musicals, Shirley Temple, escapism. Well, these films were they were tough to watch now. Imagine at the time. So he had no financial back from any major studio. So he raised the money himself to make the film. And what we really see is the poverty, the unemployment of post-war Italy. Lamberto Maggiorani, who plays Antonio Ricci, he was a factory worker. He got holidays for a factory, you know that. So there's a parallel in our lives off-screen realism. The young boy was watching the film's production on the street, helping his father sell flowers. That's how he picked him. He's helping his father. And he says, I want you to be in a film. This continues on later with Fellini. So you see, it's incredible. These are not child stars. It's not the idea of the Billy Barry school that grew up in Ireland. Again, there's right through the film, I think that's one thing we do see with Italian neorealism. It is a homage to cinema. He's putting up cinema posters. The film's final shot, which we spoke about, a minute ago, of Antonio and Bruno, that's a homage in many ways to the films of Charlie Chaplin. The Kid, see, it's the two of them. So there's cinema within cinema, which we'll see again in later on with Cinema Paradiso or Tornatore, which in many ways is homages. So they're all interlinked, but you can see that cinema now becomes, rather than just something you go to see, it becomes something of great cultural importance. So as such, that it's the critical reception of it was that sentimentality does appear in the film, takes the place of artistic emotion at times. Then there were certain criticisms that when it first came out, that it was manipulative, especially the use of the child actor. But in time, I think people says it's what one cannot deny is that it's searing emotion. There's emotion right through the film, which again is a common characteristic of neorealism, emotion, humanistic values. In some ways, people talk about it. It's a devastating film in many ways in modern city life. And we see the isolation and loneliness of this little man in the complex social world it's supposed to be. Those institutions, the church, the police, they're supposed to comfort, protect him. But in fact, we see them almost turning their back on him. The close-up of his face showed it's there's a great dignity by both the father and his son, and we see this. It's a warts and all view of post-war Italy, with the wheel of life grinding people down. As someone says, the man who was riding high in the morning, pardon upon riding high on the bicycle, is brought low by nightfall. And of course, black and white adds to this. As we said, we always hear it's one of the greatest films of all times. It is It is the foundation stone. And that's what we're talking about, the foundation stone. Put that down. Foundation stone of neorealism. Um, it is the greatest essay, but it's A.O. Scott. It is why you should still care about bicycle thieves. And still today, people talk about these films. All the great directors, Kurosawa, as a Scorsese, um, um, Kiarostami, the Iranian, they talk about this as their favorite film. Um, Ken Loach, if you watch Ken Loach, kitchen sink dramas, Kes, all those British dramas, Sweet 17, Radiant Stones, heavily influenced by. So the legacy is really what's important, and this. Something will be coming up. We'll be watching later when we talk about postmodernism. So keep an eye on the icicle thief, which is icicle, ICICLE. Okay, which is a parody, postmodernist parody of the bicycle thief. It's very good. That's 1989 Maurizio Nichetti. But I suppose for today, really, because I don't want to go on too much, because I know when you're actually watching online, sadly, but as we've that it's more difficult to follow me for a longer period of time because it's quite intense. And I suppose we're in a room and there's people coming out and the different gaps and all this kind of thing. But hopefully, you've got something out of today. And I suppose the main thing we want to stress, told not to go over 45 minutes, the main thing we want to stress is how important neorealism is. Cinema in Italy, Italian neorealism in the history and the trajectory of film studies as an academic discipline. Important those films in themselves. If you're interested, you can go and watch more. Like I'd recommend Rome Open City, Umberto D, Paisa. But perhaps more important is the legacy of Italian neorealism, which is right through world cinema, and especially what we call academic art house films we study in universities, films we talk about, films which influence society and are worthy of academic study. Everything's worthy of academic study, but all that cinema of loneliness that comes up in 1970s, Scorsese's the big, mean streets, Robert De Niro. Without Italian neorealism, there would be no Robert De Niro. Tell Robert De Niro that when you see him. Al Pacino. Those actors that you've grown up with, that you've Ray Liotta, they come from, for the first time. That's real. It's about real. Um, Moves into all the television. The Sopranos, neorealist, and then how read, authentic representations of issues in society. Irish neorealism, anyone see Pat Short, Garage, those type of films. Very much the idea of neorealism. Korea again, Great Britain. I think we mentioned Ken Loach. All those type of films which deal with the reality of life. French students out there, Kassovitz, La Haine, Hate, all those type of films. Then we talk about reactions to neorealism, and we talk about postmodernism, but there wouldn't be reactions, there wouldn't be postmodernism without neorealism reactions, and that we don't need to have representations on the screen, so we see all those different type of. But just stay for today. We're only in a couple of weeks in. Just identify with those Italian neorealism as stuff on the screen which is real, real life, poverty, those type of things, child poverty, and dealing with themes like depression, loneliness, unemployment, those type of things for the first time, and just some of the names because you come across them again and again. But maybe if we take three names: De Sica, Rossellini, Visconti, and later on from then, Fellini, Bertolucci. We talk about those that Antonioni, Pasolini, and they'll be coming up again and again in our course. Okay, so listen, come here. Thanks a million for tuning and watching in. I do hope you enjoyed The Bicycle Thieves. It's a film and it's up to you. We'll be chatting in the weeks to come and whatever. Is it overrated or is it? But it's definitely of importance in the whole canon of film studies. Um, so mind yourselves. We log off on that, and next week we'll be moving on. We'll be talking a bit about the French New Wave, and the French New Wave is just a creation. It's just a follow-on, different country, and no apologies to sorry, with apologies to French people there. The French New Wave is Italian neorealism meets American film noir, and we'd be coming across Belmondo and all those characters. So mind yourselves, and we'll talk soon. Let me make sure I get this saved properly. Stop recording, and I'll upload it for you onto that channel. And for someone who's involved in film studies, I should be better technically, but I try my best. Okay,